Thank you. Good morning. And it is great to see all of you in this final session of the year. You have been a part of our journey, and I thank you for it. And I hope this last session would be interesting for you. It would be productive, and you will take something away that would be valuable in your roles. Whatever you will hear today are all based on my personal experience and based on things that have worked well for me and areas where I have failed. So it's all on personal experience and happy to answer any questions. Okay. So with that, today I want to cover some of the common myths about data protection program and talk candidly about why they fail and what is it that we can do about it to make it successful. Because we all know in data protection there's no end to the amount of money you can spend, and you have, after spending the money, spending the time, energy, setting up the teams, if you ask the CEO or the CFO, you get sometimes an ambivalent response that yes, it is okay, it is good, but right. And I hope to today demystify some of the things that bring in that doubt and that but in that conversation, and hopefully help you succeed. First, setting context. Why is data protection today that much more challenging than it was maybe a year back or 2 years back? Because, of course, data is everywhere. It has proliferated way beyond servers, data centers, or even your regular cloud workloads. It's it is now acknowledged to have proliferated into your extreme edge devices, your operational technology devices, your LLMs, your AI agents. So it's proliferated substantially. However, often our tools have not kept up. Our approaches have not kept up. Our internal organizational processes still reflect in-premise or at the most in-premise plus cloud construct. And that is what we need to resolve if we have to be successful. And again, I will talk about 4 myths and 5 best practices. So as I was preparing this presentation, I was watching TV and preparing it at the same time. And my favorite is the Big Bang Theory. So if you notice the headings, I sort of phrase the myths and the challenges, like a Big Bang Theory episode name. So myth number 1, what I call the exfiltration conundrum. It's if you ask many program managers, many vendors, if you ask often leadership, executive leadership in the company, it all seems to be overly pivoted around exfiltration. Now, exfiltration is important. It is the end goal to prevent exfiltration. Right? But what we need to demystify and break the myth is that exfiltration as the outcome needs to be supported by the basics. If the basics are not there, your outcome will not be achievable. You will have exfiltration, you will have data loss. At the most, you will not realize that it is happening because you are not either monitoring it or you don't have the right tracking routines, or it will happen but you will realize it post facto. Both are bad. So you have to manage the basics. And if you reflect back on the slide before, you have to manage it today at a substantially higher scale than what we have done in the past. So each step has to be enabled by AI, enabled with machine learning, tools, techniques, and features that work at that scale, which includes, yes, AI-driven discovery, AI-driven classification, auto classification. You have to have segmentation. and preferably micro-segmentation for core data repositories and core assets. You have to have access control and intelligent, modern, posture-based access control, not a static, old-fashioned access control, and least privilege rules that are also context sensitive. And all of these, when done well, will allow us to manage exfiltration. Right? So that's myth number one, that you can't just quote unquote configure for exfiltration. That it doesn't exist. I mean, it's a feeling, good feeling you get that you have implemented a tool, but it's not going to be effective. Last but not the least, there is this whole world around malicious insiders, especially if you are in an organization deals with large amount of personal data. If you're in an organization that deals with intellectual property, you have to be aware of how to deal with malicious insiders. It has to be a part of your program. So these are insiders with authorized access and with malicious intent for stealing and exfiltrating data. So it's a small edge case, hopefully, but unless we structure for it, unless the program plans for it, it will not happen. Myth number two, and this is a big one. I mean, and probably you see it as the program owner within the enterprises. Many of us, me today in my role in Zscaler, and many of you who are attending, who are part of a product organization or an implementation organization, you would have faced this. The what procurement payment paradox, that yeah, I have bought the tool, I've paid the money, and go ahead and just install it. And what do you mean that is not enough? And that is a myth that through education, through awareness building at a leadership level, educating the broader organization, we have to set the expectation that this is a living animal, right? I mean, it needs constant care and feeding. You have to be on it all the time to make sure it is working as designed. It is not only effective, you have a virtuous cycle of continuous improvement that constantly improves the effectiveness of the tool month by month. You know, and you are architecting it for coverage, right? If you have only email DLP, you are not, it's not a data protection program. If you are completely ignoring, let's say, the entire GenAI usage within your company or the huge amount of SaaS that you have, it's not, you don't really have a program. You have to have coverage, you have to have effectiveness. What is your core asset? What is your crown jewel? And it may not be, if you're a consumer facing company, it may be a million credit card and other numbers. Simpler. If it's a non-standard data type that is your core asset, you have to do more to tune the dictionaries, tune the rules, tune the detection logic to make sure that it works for you and it continues to work for you. So all of these needs effort, it needs time, it needs attention, and it needs training of stuff. So it's important to have the full structure of the program. The whole myth that, okay, I have bought the tool, I have installed the tool, I paid the vendor, done. That is a recipe for failure. And it becomes incumbent on us to educate our organizations, customer organizations, honestly and candidly about these expectations that you have to sustain and improve the tool. Third one, and sometimes it's the biggest one in my experience, that business groups approach the rollout of data protection tools as quote unquote just another IT tool that stifles productivity. It will take time. It will, like slow down my processes. It will bring more, roadblocks on how I do things. It will block essential, like business transactions. And truth be told, it I sincerely believe it that only badly implemented data protection programs block productivity. If you do it well, if we do it correctly, data protection program is sort of transparent to the most 99.9% of the users because they don't really realize that it is there unless they hit some trigger. And here to me, the best practice is what I say, monitor everything and block by exception. We have to, my lived experience that we have to push back within our own organizations to have overly aggressive blocking rules. Because that is what starts blocking business. And the way I have experienced it is that it works best if business becomes part of the data protection program rollout. It should not and cannot be an IT only effort. Business has to be part of what is important to them, where do they want the block and where do they want to pass. It should not be the security teams or the IT teams judgment alone. And of course, as I said in the previous slide, you have to monitor everything at scale, originating the traffic that originates inside the enterprise, outside the enterprise, and destined for destinations which may be again in-premise, off-premise, could be an agent, could be a cloud app, it could be an LLM, whatever. And the tools that you use, like Zscaler's platform, they have to be context aware. It can't be a static regex only, regular expression only kind of tool. And that is one of the superpowers of the Zscaler data protection platform, that it, even as you monitor everything, the blocks are, it works at scale enabled by AI, but all the blocks and all your routines are very, very context aware because the platform knows the user and the user behavior posture. It knows the device you're coming from maybe and that device posture. It knows the content from content inspection and origin, destination, and the entire context around the transaction. And it helps you implement data protection rules in a way that is very, very precise. And again, subject to the context, because the difference between a malicious exfiltration attempt and normal business is often just a matter of context. The fourth one is that you ask the user to classify data. And now that the user has classified the data, the protection is automatic. Both do not work in the scale that modern businesses operate. It is beyond the user to classify, every element of data. It has to be done at scale, and it has to be done by using modern tools like AI. We have to push our internal and broader organizations to come out of the quote unquote document centric approach and ask the question, how can it work at huge levels of complexity? How can it work at scale? And AI driven classification, AI driven rule engines, and a platform that can cover all points of origin and all destinations. It should be the starting point. And on top of that, you have to tune. So if your approach involves manual intervention, you have my recommendation is to step back and say that, is it working? I mean, or is there something else that we can do to make it work at scale? So those are my four four myths that I wanted to debunk. Classify once problem solved does not work. It's a myth. We need to break that. The data protection program is a roadblock to business productivity and business enablement. Absolutely no. It is not. And to make it work, we do need business involvement. That's absolutely critical. Number two, it's not a fill it, shut it, forget it program. That does not work. You can't, just because somebody has bought the tool, somebody has paid for it, and you have contracted a vendor to manage it, does not mean your job is done and the data protection program, an effective data protection program, is operational. You have to spend that effort. And lastly, all I care about is configuring for exfiltration. Again, it is the ideal outcome, but there is a lot of hard work that has to go at the beginning to make it happen, including discovery, classification, segmentation, maybe even micro-segmentation, access control, and least privilege. Right? All of this is needed. And with that, let me come to the 5 best practices that I want to recommend. First one, measure everything. But what we need to really measure is the outcome. We need key result indicators. We need key impact indicators. Nobody works how hard you work, right? How hard I work. My CEO, I'm sure, thinks that's what he pays me for, right? I mean, that's what we get paid for. That's the salary is for. But hard work is necessary, but not sufficient. We have to intelligently measure for outcome and publish it. Second, we have to, and the platform you choose, like Zscaler, you have to monitor everything. Because unless you monitor every traffic, you do not know what to block and where to block. Because often new channels of communication come up completely unknown to your organization and our organizations. New tools, new pathways, new channels. And the only thing that works is that if you are monitoring everything that comes in and goes out, any new channel that opens up will get automatically included. So you have to measure coverage. It can only be effective by leveraging AI to scale operation. We will never be able to hire enough headcount, even if we get that approval, to manage a data protection program at scale. Fourth, and this is, to me, my personal experience, it is very, very important that we discuss it and we evangelize it as a business risk. And that means engaging with business, but also with HR, with legal. A good example is if you find a malicious insider. Okay, so what do you do? Who does what? Who goes to HR? What does HR do? Who goes to legal? What does legal do? Can you sack that person? Should you bring a business case? Do you let them go? There are many, many issues involved, right? So it has to be a pan-organizational effort. And lastly, we have to find good metrics to report to executive leadership, maybe the audit committee, the technology committee, whichever is the relevant board level committee. And that will give it the visibility, and that visibility will give executive support, which will give us the cover to operate on and maybe enforce some of the harder rules that we need to enforce to drive the program. And with that, I will stop and take questions.
Great. So what do you want to take questions now, or let Karthikeya finish and then we'll take combined questions?
Maybe whatever you think
I
best.
think take questions. I
Take
think
questions.
let's take questions because the concept will be different. So when I will be
Awesome.
busting some of the myths, it would be more around DPDPA. So the questions will align there.
Absolutely. Sounds good. So, guys, open the floor for questions. Raise your hand. I will unmute you, and then you can ask any question that you want. So, we have about 303 attendees today. So, thank you guys for joining in. Great count today. Nobody has raised hand as yet. So, any burning questions around cybersecurity that you want to ask our expert today? Yeah, Kaushik, go ahead. You can ask your question now.
Hi, Mr. Shina. Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning, Vikas, and to all of you. Myself, Kaushik, I'm from Star Cement, Kolkata office. So, being a manufacturing company, uh, and we are also a listed company, we are still not clear, although the directive has come from Government of India for the DPDP Act implementation, but how to proceed? Shall we engage any certain compliance vendor to us for first of all do the DPDP gap assessment and do the DPDP implementation? How the company should proceed for this? The things are not still clear to us. We are not able to go forward.
So if I may say so, Kaushik, that so the we have to comply. Now, either you have internally the capacity, capability, and expertise to comply on your own, or you will need outside support of experts, right? There is no third way of doing it. So if you have the expertise, good. If not, I mean, people like experts like Kartikeya and their organization, they are around to help you through that entire journey. And I'm sure Kartikeyan will cover it in his talk.
Yes, Kartika, please do connect me. I'll share you the number and the email ID. Thank you.
Yes, yes, sir. Definitely.
Great. Next question coming from Mr. Ravi Shankar. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hi, good evening, sir. Good morning, sir. So, my question is more related to, am I audible? Yeah, perfect. So, my question is more related to, you mentioned that we need to measure the outcomes, right? So, in many cases, many people work under the defense side of things, right? I mean, um, till something happens, we'll not be able to really tell the impact, right? In those kind of cases, how do we measure the outcome? Example, we'll be doing a lot of work. Okay, let us take an example. We say that, okay, firewall, we need X amount of budget, it will prevent so many things. But till the time something actually bad happens, nobody really understands the impact of what it prevented,
So
right? In those kind
great,
of cases, what are the
great
categories
question,
of
right?
impact?
Great question. So let me answer that from personal experience. That if you have a well functioning data protection program for every real case of maybe data theft that you encounter, you will be analyzing at least 10 near misses where you get a true positive, you analyze it, you work with HR, legal, and then you make a determination that what, either it's we think it is a genuine case of data exfiltration, but there isn't enough evidence to prosecute or even sack that guy. Maybe you need to put that person under enhanced monitoring or something like that, right? Uh, so there will be a large number of near misses. Of course, these near misses you can't publish to the larger organization, but your signal to noise ratio that you analyzed, uh, let's say 100,000 signals alerts, out of which 10 were determined to be true positive. Out of that, you analyzed and only one has been handled with legal to make a determination, right? So these kind of metrics also give good visibility to the leadership and the board of the scale of the program, the kind of work that goes in, and the outcomes that they see. And it is true for many programs in the security arena, not just data protection, because a a real incident happens once in a while, right? And hopefully never. But we still have to find out metrics to monitor. Then things like mean for the same cases, right? I mean, mean time to determination. How long is it taking for you that you get what is considered a good quality alert for a data exfiltration attempt? And how long does it take for you as an organization to make the determination? If it is 1 day, great. If it is 10 days, bad, right? And you have to constantly measure, monitor, and keep improving these. And these are, there are many metrics that you can actually measure. We can do a separate session on these kind of metrics.
Yes, sir. I think that will really help because, especially on the defense side of time side, right? I mean, as you mentioned, people put enormous amount of effort, but showcasing that effort becomes a challenge. So those kind of recommendations on metrics would really help, sir.
Okay.
Thank
Noted.
you very much.
Great, great. Let's move forward. Nobody else has raised hand, but there's an interesting question from Vishal in chat. So Vishal, you want to ask that live? If you want to ask live, please raise your hand. I will unmute you. If not, I'm gonna read the question for you, Suba. So Vishal is from Bangalore chapter, and what he's asking is, from your experience, how much time and effort does it usually take to roll out a foundational data protection program? And further, when does the real business value starts coming in? So two questions in one.
Yep. Great question, Vishal. I would say it does not take a lot of time, provided you are very intentional about what you want out of the program and communicate that within the company. So let me take a step back. So there, often the fallacious thinking is that the most of the time it takes to implement the tools and the technical controls, and that is the way it should be. That is wrong. You should spend the most amount of time and energy in identifying what really are your core, crown jewels, what really are the core assets. And once that is in place, the starting to implement the program does not take a lot of time. I would say maybe a month, 2 months, right? In pervasive inspection, like using the Zscaler platform, maybe a couple of months to roll out, and then you can start inspecting your traffic and start experimenting with rules, right? So that it doesn't take long. But do you know what you want to monitor? What really is at stake? Because if you go around asking your, 5 directs of your CEO, everybody thinks that, their data, their baby is the most precious. But as an organization, you have to decide what are your crown jewels. One that should take the most amount of time and energy. Once that is done, the rollout of the rest of the program is not that difficult at all.
Great, great. Let's move forward. I don't see anybody else who's interested in asking questions around cybersecurity. There are some questions coming around data protection. So Anita just raised hand. So let's take this last question from Anita, and then we'll move to DPDPA part. Yeah, Anita, go ahead, please.
Hello. Thank you, sir. So my question is, according to the criticality of the data, mostly we are considering the PI and sensitive data is handled by the application. So if the
Could you
application
speak a
is,
little bit slowly, Anita?
yeah. If the application is handling employee data, so will it be considered as a critical or crown jewel application? Because many time I have seen that employee data is not considered that much of importance as compared to the customer data. So in that
I
case,
think I hear your question, and it has many aspects, and Kartika will cover that, right? Because under the new legislation, employee data is also personal digital data, and it also needs to be protected. So not just customer personal data, but employee personal data, maybe even service provider personal data, right? I mean, if you have 15 contractors and you actually hold their records, right? I mean, so they are all covered. So you have to secure them, right? Now, what you prioritize under the data protection program and how you go about it, sequence, that is a matter of planning. And that's a matter of implementation and planning. But I mean, to answer your question, go back to your question, yes, employee data has to be protected. They are covered under the act and the rules.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Great. No other questions around cybersecurity. So over to you, Kartikeya. Let's debunk the myths around DPDPA.
Perfect. And thank you. I hope I'm audible. And like Sova, I don't have slides. Sorry. It will be more on personal experience again. But what we have done today is that after I got this message that the podcast would be around myths, I was so excited because uh, with this, I am getting an opportunity to really pour my heart out and discuss certain things which are so critical, so important, especially when it is coming to DPDPA. So when we are talking about the myths, what I have done for today's session and for all of you is that I have taken seven carefully curated myths, and these seven myths which have been curated are both based on the DPDPA 2023. That was in 2023, the act that came out. And to everybody, since we are now 1 month out, so the final rules which came in 13th November 2025. So I've taken both of it, and this is also based on my multiple client interactions. Till now, I have met more than 100 clients and the meetings that I have had with them. So, what is that coming out clearly, and what is the myth, and what is the fact, is what this whole discussion will be around. And what I'll do is that I'll try to wrap it up in 20 minutes and then again give you around about 10 minutes for any Q&A so that we have enough time to answer any specific questions that you have on whatever I'm actually telling you. So, with this, let's get dive in into the first myth that I want to really bust is that some of the people who I have interacted with have told me that DPDPA compliance is one-time effort. So, how many of you think that this is a not a one-time effort? Please give me a thumbs up on the chat so that I know that all of you are awake and you don't have this kind of a myth. Okay, I can see a lot of thumbs ups coming. So, yes, it's a myth. So, myth is many organizations view that DPDPA compliance is a discrete project, implement some systems, achieve a certification, and move forward. So, that is what they are thinking. The assumption is that once the policies and the documents and these systems are in place, compliance obligations are satisfied, and we are out of the thick. The fact, and unfortunate for like when I told them, and unfortunately they were surprised also to some extent, is that DPDPA compliance is inherently a continuous and a cyclical process. Under the DPDP rules, if you see the 2025 final rules that came out, the obligation, the compliance obligations are persisting across multiple operational dimensions. And let me tell you some of these dimensions. First, you have ongoing consent management. Guys, if you have an ongoing consent management, how can you do it for once, right? And we all know in our companies, data is coming in every single minute. If you do an audit, if you do whatever is there, what you get out of it, you get a snapshot. This snapshot is just telling that at this moment, these are the compliances that you were in, right? You were compliant for this, you were compliant for, let's say, data subject right, etc. But does the story stop there? No, the story does not stop there. It is a continuous process, continuous data that is pouring into our organization, continuous personal data which is coming in, and constantly we are sending it out also. And there is constantly requirement of monitoring the consent that is there, because consent, if it is withdrawn, we have to stop processing. So what is it under the data life cycle that we have done to make it sure that it is just not at the point of collection, but it is continuously managed, tracked, honoring the consent preferences. So all of this is an ongoing consent management. Next important thing that I wanted to tell you as a dimension which is making DPDPA compliance an ongoing or a continuous affair is the security and breach response. We all know that we have to report it in 72 hours. How will you report it in 72 hours? You have to identify that, yes, this particular breach has happened, and now I'm going to investigate and report it. So it cannot be a one time effort. Rights fulfillment. Anybody who's coming up with their right to access, correction, erasure, etc., how are they managing it? So it is again not a one time effort. Periodic assessments for significant data fiduciaries. We already know that there is to be data protection impact assessment. There are significant data fiduciaries which have to do annual audits. Again, annual audit, DPIAs. Why? Because it is a continuous effort. And at the end of the day, we are having a living in a world where regulatory evolution is happening. Very soon, we might even see an AI related act coming out. AI has a very, very strong relation to data privacy and protection because Gen AI is actually busting a lot of these encryptions and maskings and other such things where we were trying to de-identify personal data. It is re-identifying it, because of which we are seeing that yes, there would be an evolution of legislation, new regulations, new requirements that might come over the regulatory landscape where we'll have to align. So again, why can it be just a one time effort? It is not a one time effort, guys. It is a continuous process. We have to ensure that once we have built it, yes, we have to build it once, because if it is not built once, how will we be able to sustain? But there is an effort that is required, because otherwise it will just lead to some drift. There'll be unmanaged technical debt. We have seen, as Suva was mentioning, operational blind spots will be there, and you will have certain breaches which were very well, which could have been avoided, to be very honest. So that is my first myth I wanted to bust. The second important myth to all of you is the DPDP rules ban all cross border data transfer. I don't know where this came from, because when I was reading the rules, I was going back, referring to the act, it was very clear that unlike GDPR, now GDPR is a restrictive law. It says that if you want to send out personal data out of European Economic Area, out of European Union, you will have to have an adequacy decision. You will have to have, if not an adequacy decision, then maybe standard contractual clauses. If not a standard contractual clause, only for once, maybe an ad hoc contract clause or a derogation. Now, all of this is making it difficult for sending personal data out into the other country. Whereas when it comes to DPDPA, it is the reverse. We are open to sending personal data out. We are not saying anything about data localization. We are not talking about anything. Yes, data sovereignty might come at one particular point of time, for which there is a small elbow room that the government of India has kept in the law, saying that there will be a blacklist. Now, this blacklist of country, what does that mean? That when you have a blacklist of a country, it's a very simple thing, guys. It is saying that for my enemy countries, or countries where there's a high risk to the potential risk for my personal data that I'm transferring, in these countries, you will not be able to send. Who will decide it? Government of India. When it will come in some time, maybe when the authority is set up. So we will be waiting for a blacklist, and apart from that blacklist, anywhere else in the world, we will have freedom to send our personal data. Definitely, we will be having our appropriate safeguards. For example, we will have encryption, masking, role-based access, all of that will be there. So there is, what is the fact? Permitted transfers? Answer is yes. Government has given that kind of adequate level of data protection. If you are giving, you are permitted to transfer. Contractual safeguards? Again, answer is yes. You will have to have some kind of a data processing agreement with some appropriate safeguard. Then there is a legitimate purpose of processing. Answer is yes, because when we are transferring, it might be a data processor who is sitting outside our country, maybe a cloud environment. or some other SaaS service provider who is actually taking that. But that doesn't mean without I would say that without a consent, definitely we cannot give, but in the consent, we will be transparent enough in telling the data principal that yes, I am using a cloud service provider or a SaaS product, which will be making sure that your data gets transferred to, let's say, Singapore and then back to India. That privacy notice will need to be there. Now, is there a universal localization mandate? Answer is no. There is no universal sorry, there is a no universal localization mandate, and this is a very, very interesting aspect also when it comes to this particular myth. Coming back to the gap. Now, the gap is, I personally feel that people take sovereignty and localization in same breath, whereas what I feel that we should not mix the two. Data sovereignty and data localization are very different aspects, and government of India also thinks so, because that is very well seen in the law, that they are not talking about data localization, but yes, data sovereignty is something which India is working towards. We are having our own LLM, Sarvnam. Why? Because we are talking about data sovereignty. We are asking about make in India, because we understand that there will be a requirement of data sovereignty, but we should not confuse this concept with data localization. Now, my third myth that I want to really bust is around consent manager are mandatory for all data fiduciary. I don't know how people have read this in the DPDPA rules or in the act. They have come to this consensus, and it's very difficult because then I need to do some whiteboarding to explain them the concept and why the concept of consent manager came into picture. But they actually come out and with prominence say that consent managers in DPDPA, I don't have to do anything now. Once the consent manager will come, he will do everything. That is what the law says. No, that is not what the law says. Law is very clear on consent managers, and it is also saying that it is not mandatory. You can take data principal's request via a consent manager, or you can take it directly from a data principal. It's up to you. And you have to create something called as an ICM, internal consent management tool, which will be your own tool within your organization, which will be managing consent managers will not manage the consent within your organization. It will be your own tool that you are managing. Yes, there will be a direct connection. You can have a back to back connection with the consent manager to your tool that you are using internally for your organization, because that will have a seamless way of consent being withdrawn or given. It will be easier for you to do the consent solutioning. Now, very important, the fact that is there is that there will be an infrastructure which will be enabling consent management. And this infrastructure, or these group of companies that are coming up, and some of them are already doing as we speak, proof of concept or POC with the government of India, and they will be licensed to become a consent manager. These licensed companies, when they are the consent managers, they will act as a neutral intermediary between the data principal and the data fiduciary. These neutral intermediaries will be optional. Why would I like to go to a consent manager? Because in one go, I have a dashboard where I can see all the consents that I have given over a period of time. I can see which are getting expired, I can withdraw them. All of this is there in one dashboard itself, and this is what I would need to have a respite from the consent fatigue that I might experience by giving more than 100, 200 consents, and then also be responsible for the children consent. So if I am like I am a parent, for the verifiable parental consent, again another 200, 300 consents will flow into me. How will I manage all of this? That is why, in order to ease this, there has to be a consent manager, and this is an infrastructure which will enable consent management. This is what Government of India has come up with, and that is how you will see in 12 months, and written in the rules also, that you will see that in 12 months there will be this framework, this ecosystem which will be there after they have taken the license from the government. Now, very important part, another fact that is there is that data fiduciary accountability regardless of whether the consent manager is used, whether the consent was directly collected, the data fiduciary accountability will still exist. Some people think that, okay, via consent manager I am taking, then consent manager would be responsible or accountable. No, still the data fiduciary will be accountable. This is very clear if you read the rules with the act. What is happening is that we have a tendency of reading the latest one, and latest is the rules. We forget that the rules are basically further explaining or building upon the concepts which are written in the act itself, that is the DPDPA Act of 2023. The last important aspect for as a fact is that there will be a cost benefit flexibility. Smaller organizations or those with simpler data processing footprints may find direct consent management more cost effective than to subscribe to consent manager platforms, because these manager consent manager platforms, if for example they give, and this is hypothetical, if they give free subscription to me to go and log into, and this is how the telecom service providers also did, right? So if they give free, there is nothing called as free. So where will they make money? They will make money by giving these millions of subscriber ready access to your internal consent management tool. So that will be how they might be making a business model out of it. Again, to highlight, the gap was that there is unnecessary adoption of consent manager, which is adding to operational financial complexity. So don't worry about it. The myth is busted. Consent managers are not mandatory for all data fiduciaries. It is basically an option that there can be data principals who want to come via the consent manager. The last myth, in the interest of time, that I really want to bust is that we have something called as all businesses need a DPO. Now, I am not against keeping a DPO. I'm very happy. I would be the first person who will recommend you that please keep a DPO, because it really will make your life easier as a data fiduciary. But now coming back to our point, it is the myth is that the visibility of DPO requirements in DPDPA discussion has led many organizations to assume that appointing a DPO is a universal compliance mandate. And when I say a universal compliance mandate, I am saying that the fact of this is it is there as a mandate, but for significant data fiduciaries. And significant data fiduciaries have not been listed, or the categorization of significant data fiduciary still needs some more clarification from the government of India. Only a very high level understanding has been given under DPDPA, which is saying that anybody who is processing large volume of data or sensitivity or data sensitivity, or there is a processing risk and there is an operational scope, so because of which you can be a significant data fiduciary. So the criteria is not clear. Said that, there are some thresholds and triggers which the government will notify later, that about this threshold, above this, you will be a significant data fiduciary. Smaller organizations will definitely be exempted, so they don't have to bother about DPO. Plus, it's a very important thing that a grievance officer is a mandate under the law. Why grievance officer is a mandate? Because if you understand, you have a 90-day obligation of grievance redressal. Now, in order to do that, how will you be able to do that? You can only do it when you have a proper grievance redressal mechanism with a grievance officer at your disposal. So most of these people have a grievance officer. So this grievance officer is something which we already had because of the IT Act. Now we have to make sure that somebody from legal plus some technical bent of mind is there available to be a grievance redressal officer, so that grievances with respect to personal data can be fulfilled. So this is my, in the interest of time, final myth that I wanted to bust. There is a myth around smaller businesses are exempted from compliance. This is the last thing I wanted to cover, but just would like to have a one closing line that smaller enterprises are not exempted. All people, every single company in India, whether big or small, have to comply with DPDPA obligation. There is no blanket exemption as of now. So over to you, Vikas.